Hola, 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 buenas noches. Buenas noches, perdonen un poquito por el retraso, pero como han visto ustedes, pues está todavía entrando un poquito de público. De todas formas, vamos a empezar. Amigos, amigas, en nombre de todos los que soñamos la Alhambra cada día, les doy la bienvenida pues a este cultural, que es una forma innovadora de conocer la cultura, de vivir la cultura, de sentir la cultura, también de producir cultura. Sí.
Honestly, I have to admit that we are all really touched. We are very satisfied with the response of the city of Granada to our initiative, to this festival. So I believe this is going to be one of the great cultural events of the year in Andalusia. So we are proving here that when Granada really has the will, when we want to do it, we can do it. So I'm asking for a round of applause for our team, Dreamers of the Alhambra, and also a round of applause for Granada because of this great welcome. And I'm leaving you with one of the creators, one of the dreamers that dreamt of this initiative, of this festival. Dear audience, President of the University of Granada, politicians, representatives from cultural institutions, dear audience that are here today, allow me to start with the words of Jorge Luis Borges. Literature is a dream, and that's the dream of this event, because we believe there is a need for new directions for the culture, for thinking, and those directions are set by the creators that are going to be with us during these days. So we're thinking about the literary culture for tomorrow, and we are a society facing huge challenges, human and technological challenges. So culture is like the air we breathe, invisible, shared, and essential for life. And cultural, this festival borns out of that conviction. We need to keep giving life to our culture, project ourselves in new challenges, and go deep into this collective dream of a more human and more humanist world. So this goal, as our director said, that have us today here really moved and really surprised as well because of this great public participation. So today Granada becomes a huge capital and of the culture, and the new nerve of culture is no doubt ourselves. So that's why cultural is making a very important bet to foster culture that make us different from the north. Another kind of literature, expanded literature that goes beyond the book, the object, and that goes into graffiti, into documentary, independent edition. So that's the new literature, the literature of the future, the one creating new social imaginaries and new sentimental educations. So with cultural, the patronage of the Alhambra not only tries to foster and to promote culture, but also to create it. And Rodrigo, his director, is very clear on that. He's a very strategic thinker that has turned imagination in direction and dream in a pathway. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for being so generous with our city. Thank you so much as well to the work of Juan Salvador. Where are you? Thank you so much, Juan. Thanks to his fantastic team. I can't name them all, but you know that this is happening now because of you, because of your work. You made it possible, you made it real, this fantastic tale of Nettie, a dream come true. And I have to mention the real creator of all this, Patricia Escalona, the co-director of Cultural, that is not only the best professional for the organization of literary events in this country, brilliant, creative and brave, but she's also a great friend and a great sister. Of course, thanks to the technical coordination, Tiffany Martina and Sandy Sanchez, with a huge effort to make this event possible. I have to mention as well that to this stream, many other agents, the majority of agents from the city, which is something really unusual, have come together and they participate in Cultura, because Cultura is a meeting of all of us and for all of us. So we have the City Council here, Juan Ramon, and Juan García Motero, of course, that were really enthusiastic. The University of Granada, Pedro, our president, many other departments of the university, the School of Literature, the Foundation Amigos de la Alhambra, the Foundation Tres Culturas, Foundation Sierra Elvira, Granada, the Ateneum of Granada, the Association Diente de Oro, and of course Granada 2031. And we also have Foundation La Caixa, Foundation Agua, and Denominación de Origen Granada. We are already the European cultural capital city. We've proven that with this international festival of poetry, with the Gravite Festival Literature, with Utopias, another festival, historic novel festival, the Andalusian Literature Center, our book fair, and many other events around literature and culture. So we want to try and experience this vast territory from many other dimensions, such as sustainability, inclusion, and in order always to have Granada as a great space, as a great place to host literature from all around the world and for all around the world. So Shakespeare used to say that we're made of the matter of dreams, and I would add, and in Granada, we're made of literature. Welcome to Cultura. Enjoy these 3 amazing days. Share, think, dream and read. Thank you so much. And now I'll give the floor to the great Munir Ashid, who's going to be presenting the whole event. Good afternoon. Welcome to Cultural. This is an international conference or festival that gathers here in a very privileged place a selection of the best contemporary literature and many agents of the book world here in Granada and also in Andalusia. And now we're going to enjoy a conversation entitled Kissing the Books between Salman Rushdie and Andrés Neuman. Salman Rushdie was born in Bombay in 1947. His narrative is characterized by combining something that we could call magic realism with the historical and political keys of our time. He's one of the best-known contemporary writers, and he's been awarded many times with many different prizes. He's even been named Sir. His fight for freedom of speech was intensified after the fatwa of Ayatollah Khomeini condemning him to death because of his book, The Satanic Verses. So he has the capacity to articulate complex, exuberant narratives throughout a very rich and ironic language that is always in a permanent transformation. He works with English as an expansive language, and he's been one of the greatest influence of literature. His literature narrative is based in turning language into a form of resistance to the violence of the state, to the religious extremisms, and to any other kind of oppression. So telling stories is an ethical gesture. His presence here has a symbolic value as a flagship for the defense of freedom of speech, but also as with an aesthetic dimension, because he showcases a literature that believes in the coincidence of chaos and beauty, and in the possibility of using literature to erase any kind of boundary, and in order to create any kind of imagination world. So Andrés Neuman was born in Buenos Aires. He came to our city at the age of 14, and he started writing about. He started with the first tale about the dictatorship in his country. So, in 1999, he was a finalist of the Heralde Prize with Bariloche, his very first novel, and that was considered by Bolaño as one of the authors that will be representative from the literature. And he also won many other prizes, Alfaguara, for instance, lately. And his work is defined by the narrative intelligence that goes away from sentimentalism. He has very subtle characters, sometimes that are marked by the displacement or by the loss, and he creates spaces where intimacy becomes political and the other way around. And this conversation is a unique opportunity to have a conversation between two very interesting, very interesting authors that are going to have this dialogue. And without further ado, and I remember we're going to have a book selling in our library in the Palace of Charles V. And also to mention that our festival is a sustainable event according to the label that has issued the University of Granada. So I'll ask you to be responsible with the space. This is a protected space, so please be very careful with any kind of residue, and also be careful with your displacements. And for the event that requires simultaneous translation, you're going to be using your own headset, so please don't forget to bring them. And I'm going to ask you to turn your phones off, and I'll leave you with Andrés Neuman and Salman Rushdie.
And nobody did.
Yeah, yes, nobody. Yeah, all right. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to be here.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Es un placer tenerlos aquí y es un momento especial y emocionante.
And it is a very special moment for me, and I think we're going to enjoy it.
Welcome, dear Mr. Salman Rushdie. I understand this is a very special place for you, both because it is, historically speaking, but as well because you've been here at least 3 times, I think?
This is the 3rd time. Yes, I came here when I was 19 years old. When I was at college, 3 college friends of mine and me came for a little, very cheap holiday in Andalusia. We went to Córdoba and Sevilla and Toledo and ended up here. So that was my first look at this beautiful place. And then I came again, that was 1966. I came again 30 years later, 1996, when the Spanish translation of my novel, Último Suspiro del Moro, came out. And I did an event here in a beautiful room in the Palaces with Antonio Muñoz Molina. And now, so I come once every 30 years.
Yeah.
So now it's 29 years since then. So
We can't wait for the next one.
I can't wait for the next one.
So welcome again here, Mr. Rushdie. And since you're such a masterful narrator, we're going to try to have a conversation under the form of a kind of flashback. We'll start with your most recent book, and then we'll go back to a few of the previous ones, visiting different stages of your work, if that sounds good to you. But first of all, let's have a quick look to the title of this conversation, which is besar los libros, to kiss books. And you actually learn how to kiss books, both literally and poetically. Could you tell us how that came?
Well, you know, in India where I grew up, there's a tradition in many families that if a holy book falls on the ground, whatever it is, that when you pick it up, you must kiss it in order to, in a way, to apologize. And in our family, that idea was extended to all books. So if you dropped a book on the ground, you had to pick it up and kiss it. And the only other thing about which that was true was bread. If you dropped bread on the ground, you had to kiss it, pick it up and kiss it. So I thought this is rather beautiful because it's two kinds of nourishment, you know. It's food for the body and food for the soul.
Exactly.
And
That rings a bell.
Worth kissing.
That rings a bell here because Lorca once said, en cambio le daría medio pan y un libro. I would give them like half a bread and a book, like two forms, necessary forms of nourishment.
Yeah, well, my parents knew it too. Maybe they read Lorca.
So you were actually kissing knowledge and language, and maybe that's what you've been doing for whole of your life, beginning with your very first book, which was published, I think, like 50 years ago exactly now, until the new one.
Yeah, half a century. It makes you feel so young.
You are. So, in your last book, Knife, you mentioned two cases sadly connected. The case of the Egyptian Nobel Prize, Naguib Mahfouz, who lived under threat for so many years, and he refused to have any bodyguards of security measures until he was actually attacked. And he could barely write after that, and actually had to accept these safety measures. But your case, luckily, is similar but meaningfully different because you were living with security for so many years, and then you drop it, you live a relatively normal life for so many years, and then you were attacked 3 years ago, and you not only managed to survive, but as well you wrote one of your best books ever. That's a kind of a miracle.
Oh, thank you. And since then, I finished another book, which you will have to see what you think of it. But no, I think it was very important for me to feel that I could continue with my work, you know. And it took a little while, I mean, because the attack was very severe, and I was fortunate to survive it. And there was a period when I thought I didn't know how to begin to write again. But I remember my literary agent, Andrew Wiley, came to see me in the hospital, and he said, "Of course you're going to write a book about this." And I said, "No, you know, I think I'm really not going to write a book about this." And he said, "No, you're going to write a book about it." And he left, and he was right and I was wrong. So in the end, writing the book became important, you know, as a way back to my real life, which is the only life I ever wanted, which is to write books.
You said you don't believe in miracles, but your books do.
Yeah. My books, the miracles crossed over from my books into my real life. I don't believe in miracles, but I believe in certain kinds of miracles. I believe in the miracle of medical science. I believe in the miracle of surgeon's skill. And also luck. You know, luck has a part to play. Because I said it somewhere in the book that one of the, you know, when doctors think you're going to be all right, they start telling terrible bad jokes. And one of the doctors in the hospital, when he thought, okay, I'm probably going to be okay, he said to me, "You know what you're lucky about?" I said, "No, tell me what's the lucky part of this." And he said, "The lucky part is that the man who attacked you had no idea how to kill a man with a knife." So that's what I'm saying, luck. He missed various targets which would have ended the story right there. So luck and skill. You know, I believe in those miracles.
And there's a couple of more miracles in your book and life. We'll talk about them later. One of the miracle of love and of love, your love stories, we're gonna get there. But there's also the miracle of keeping your sense of humor as a form perhaps of survival. Because strangely enough, Knife is, in many parts, a really funny book, full of word games, meaningful word games, like this is a story of the I, me, yo, and the story of my I, meaning the I lost. You even joke with the nicknames of your nearly assassin, and you end up calling him Ass. But I think that the most beautiful joke you make is when you say, as the attentive reader have guessed, I did survive.
Well, you know, humor is the best revenge, which is why tyrants and assassins, I guess, have in common that they can't take a joke. We know all about this in America.
Yeah. Actually, in the end, after one of the most amazing chapters of your book, the one where you imagine a meeting between you and your nearly killer, which is an impressive piece of art, in my opinion. You end up summarizing it this way. There are people who have sense of humor and people who have not, and apparently your nearly killer didn't have any sense of humor.
I mean, actually, one of the things people don't often say about the Satanic Verses is that it's quite a funny book. And I think it's because what happened to it was not funny. It was assumed that the book couldn't be funny. But actually, two things happen when people read that book. This happened to me many, many times. The two things people say, the first thing they say is, where was the dirty part? Because I couldn't find it. And the other part was, who knew that it was funny? And I said, people who read it know that it's funny. People who don't read it are the people who attack it. And I used to be annoyed about the fact that the book was being attacked by people who hadn't read it. And then I thought this very often happens to books. You know, when James Joyce was accused of being a pornographer, it was quite clear that people who did that had not read Ulysses, because the book is very great, but its capacity to arouse people sexually is probably quite limited. And when Nabokov was accused of supporting pedophiles because of Lolita, clearly those accusers had not read this very, very moral book. You know? So then I thought maybe that's necessary. In order to attack a book, you have to not read it.
Just like it happened with your attacker.
Yes,
he himself admitted he hadn't read your books, maybe 2 pages and a couple of interviews, and that was all.
Yeah, which I thought, if I was writing his story as a novelist and showing it to my editor would say, this is not sufficiently motivated. You know, you're not offering a sufficient reason for him to carry out. I mean, murder is a big deal. You know, murder is a serious crime. And this was a person with no previous to find out anything about the person he wanted to kill. And that's why I, in the end, wrote this chapter you mentioned, which is the one fictional chapter in a completely non-fictional book, where I imagine a conversation with him.
4 sessions, right? Like a series of sessions.
Yeah, a series of sessions, yes. Because my idea was I want to see if I can get inside his head. Let me see if I can make him up convincingly. And you know, there's a story which I tell in the book that it happened to the great Samuel Beckett was also attacked by a man with a knife and almost died. And when the man came, and the man was a pimp with the comical name of Prudent. Anyway, Prudent the pimp, when he came to trial, Beckett was in the court and he said to him, "Why did you do it?" And all the man could say is, "C'est pas, monsieur, je m'excuse." I'm sorry, I don't know.
How polite of him, right?
So I thought if I was to actually meet this guy, he would not say anything interesting. So it's better that I make him up so he becomes one of my characters. So that's what I did to him. He tried to kill me, I made him one of my characters. Now he belongs to me.
So we've got like serious social political analysis in your book. We've got tragic comedy. We've got literature because you use literary tools and devices as a way of translating the absurd plot you were involved in. And there's also love involved. And amazingly enough, the book turns more and more into a love story. As if the main characters of your book deserve more love than hatred. They've taken enough hatred. So if you don't mind, I think the audience would really love for you to tell the story how you met with a little bit of blood involved too. Your wonderful wife Eliza, who is a great poet, novelist.
You want me to tell the story of my embarrassment? This was like 9 years ago or something, almost 9 years. We had both taken part in a literary event, and there was an after party. And I'd met her in the backstage, and I was kind of interested. But we'd never met before. And in the after party, it was a very beautiful sunny evening in New York City. The after party was in a roof room which had a terrace outside. So I said, let's go out on the terrace and look at this. New York City at night is very beautiful. And so we went towards the terrace, and there were these sliding glass doors. And she went out through the sliding glass door, and I assumed that the other one was open. But it was closed. So, when you don't know that there's a door in your way, you just walk into it like that. So I smashed into the door, and I fell on the floor, and my nose was bleeding. And people were going, "Oh my God, Salman Rushdie's fallen down." And I was just telling myself, do not faint. Just don't fucking faint. But I didn't faint, and then I got faint. And I was embarrassed, it was embarrassing. So I thought I should go home now. So I said, okay, I think I'm going home. And Eliza came down with me to make sure that I was okay and that I could get in a taxi and so on. And then she got in the taxi. And the rest is history. But I began to think that incident was like a comic foreshadowing of the tragic event, which also ended up with me falling on the ground with blood. So first comedy, then tragedy, But I thought when I was writing the book, that the book really is about three people. It's about him, the would-be assassin, and me, the target, and Eliza, this triangle. And in the triangle, there's me at one point, and at the other 2 points, there are these opposing forces. The force of love and the force of hatred, the force of life and the force of death. And I thought, okay, that's the story I want to tell. And how I thought it would be an enjoyable surprise for people if they pick up this book and they think they're going to get some kind of a true crime story. And instead they get a love story. And the love story triumphs over the crime story.
And it's a story about caretaking too, and a beautiful one. In fact, you tell the story of the attack in a very tragic, comic way, because incredibly enough, you were talking about the City of Asylum project, which is meant to protect writers under risk, under some kind of threat. And when you started being attacked, part of the audience thought it was like a performance about the risk of the freedom of speech, but sadly it wasn't.
Yes, people thought it was a stunt. But it would have been better if it was, but it wasn't. Unfortunately, there was I mean, they were like, we were sitting on a stage area like this, and there was about that number of steps up to the stage. And if there had been one person standing there, nothing would have happened. But there was nobody protecting the stage. And so he had a clear run, unfortunately. But as I've said, he had no idea how to kill a man with a knife. So he's in jail and I'm in the Alhambra.
So the love story, which is at the heart of your book, makes me think about a very interesting topic you deal with too, which is kind of against a cliche almost everybody has heard about how happiness is supposed not to be a good theme for writing, and that only unhappiness is worth of a piece of art. Yeah. And you kind of contradict that idea, and I find it very interesting because I think there are very few writers able to do so, not to mention people who have endured what you have.
You know, there's a famous line of Tolstoy's, the opening line of Anna Karenina. He says, all happy families are alike, and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own fashion. Yeah. And I remember reading this and thinking, that's not true. I mean, I'm sorry, Count Tolstoy, but I don't think that's true. I don't think all happy families are alike. I think there aren't many happy families, that's the other thing. And then there's another famous line of the French essayist Henri de Monterland, who said happiness writes white. In other words, it doesn't show up on the page. Very hard to write about it. It is much easier to write about unhappiness. One of the things I set myself as a task in this book was to see if I could, contradict Leo Tolstoy. And see...
Modestly?
Yeah, not pushing, not trying very hard. But I wanted to see if I could create something interesting and credible, which you could describe as happiness.
And you did. And the dialogue with A, we're just finishing this part about knife, becomes a reflection on nowadays fanatics and social networks, preachers, and what we could call the pedagogy of violence. And that's how it jumps from your personal case to our collective conflicts, because, there's this Machado line saying, desprecia cuanto ignora. They hate everything that they ignore. And that seems to be the case not only with this particular person, but as well as kind of a collective conflict of nowadays. And your book seems to be trying to fight against that.
I think so we live in this strange moment in which, for some part of society, culture has become kind of the enemy. Education, art, thought, these things are considered to be wrong, bad for you. It's a strange inversion of reality. So we live in this upside-down world. And this is why when people accuse me of magic realism, which happens from time to time, I say that what strikes me as magic realism is narrative in which nothing weird happens, in which everything is normal. People fall in love, fall out of love, get married, get divorced. That seems to me like fantasy. Because really the world is bizarre, and it's getting more bizarre every day. So to write bizarre fiction is more truthful than to write not bizarre fiction. That feels like escapism. So I think I'm a completely realist writer. Because when people say magic realism, all they actually hear is magic. They don't hear realism. Whereas actually the point of it is that it's true.
And talking about the magic of reality, you've been sometimes compared to kind of a Sherazade from the Arabic Nights, or 1001 Nights, we say in Spanish. But Sherazade actually saved her life by telling stories, whereas you were threatened and then almost killed because you were telling stories. So you're a kind of a different anti-Sherazade. But what you did actually tell is many, many stories. So we can jump to one of the most important ones, which is Midnight's Children. You were born in 1947, sorry to mention it, and but everybody knows anyway. And
I'm not ashamed of it.
You should be proud, because that is the year of the independence of India.
Yes.
And Midnight's Children begins with a kind of a magic event that is a few children that are born exactly at that midnight, particularly the protagonist, Salim Sinai, who gets some magical powers from the fact that they are being born exactly at the same time as the Indian independence.
Yeah, what I thought is that the independence of a country from more than 200 years of colonialism is a kind of wonderful thing. And so I thought that the children born at that moment should be wonderful children. And that's how that idea came about, just that they should, in a way, represent the wonderment of the moment. You know, the first children to be born free in India for 250 years. I was born in June of 1947, and the independence of India and Pakistan happened exactly 8 weeks later. And when I was a kid, my parents used to tell this terrible joke. They said, you know, Salman was born and 8 weeks later the British ran away. And I thought, is that funny? But then, in a way, they did me a favor, because I remembered this joke. And at a certain point, I thought, supposing there isn't an 8-week difference. Supposing it's the same time. Squash away the 8 weeks into the same night. Then what? And then I thought, well, that means that the child and the country are kind of twins. And you have to tell the story of both the twins. You can't just tell the story of one of them. So the book expanded colossally from what I had first thought, and took me years to write.
I was very moved by the fact that those children have a kind of very prominent physical imperfections, which are linked with their magical powers. Of course, Salim has a big and dripping nose, and because he smells everything, kind of. He guesses everything, and perhaps has an excess of sensibility, right?
Yeah, he can smell emotions. He can smell fear. He can smell love.
Can you? Can you?
Only on Tuesdays. But I remember when the book came out, I was in India doing some events for the book, and I walked out on this stage in Delhi, I think. And a woman's voice from the audience said, quite loudly, said, "Oh, but he's got a perfectly ordinary nose."
What a disappointment.
You know, I thought, really? Perfectly ordinary? I think it's quite a splendid nose. But what she meant is that I didn't look like the character. She assumed that I would arrive with this colossal kind of Pinocchio nose, and was disappointed that I was not him.
Shiva, another character, was born at the same time as Salim and has an incredibly large knees, and knees are usually involved, you know, in fighting or praying. So, at their own way, they are kind of sacred parts of the body.
And they were exchanged at birth, so in a way they have each other's lives. And then, when the book came out, another extraordinary thing happened. There was an article on the Indian sports pages which said that the legendary Indian captain of the cricket team, Sunil Gavaskar, that it happened to him, that in the hospital where he was born, the nurses made a mistake and brought the wrong baby to his mother. And fortunately, his uncle, the mother didn't notice, but his uncle who was there said, this is not the same child as yesterday. And they were able to correct the mistake. But I thought, you can't make anything up, it's all true. Even the captain of India at cricket can be exchanged at birth. So why not my kids?
Then we've got Sundari, author of The Midnight Children, a girl so impossibly beautiful that her own mother gets blind, giving her birth. And strangely enough, her face will suffer a knife attack, and her fate changes.
Yeah, well, so knife attacks have been prefigured in early work of mine, which didn't mean that I wanted it to happen.
Yeah, you talk a lot about foreshadowing, right? Like premonitions, dreams.
If you write enough books, you foreshadow things that are going to happen. I mean, I was so young when I wrote that book, I had no sense of being vulnerable, I mean, I was 28 or something when I started writing that book. I was 33 when it came out. When you're that age, you feel immortal, and then you discover that you're not.
You wrote as well a book called Quixote. It was published right before the pandemic, and it was translated into Spanish. I hope you can get in the bookstore later. And I like to think that last thing you wrote about, because our reality changed forever, was exactly the book and the character which changed our fictions forever.
Well, I'd been living in America for a long time by then, and I finally felt ready to take on a big canvas novel about what America was like and what was happening across the country. And so I thought two things. I thought, first of all, the idea of the road novel is very central to a lot of American fiction. So I wanted to write a road novel. And I thought, what's the greatest road novel ever written? And the answer is Don Quixote. So then I thought, I have a character who is an Indian-American character who is deluded in many ways, not unlike Don Quixote. Deludes himself into thinking things are possible which are not possible, and that he's something which he isn't. And he uses Quixote as a pen name to write to a woman that he's obsessed by and who thinks he's a stalker. I often thought that if Don Quixote was pursuing his love now, he would be considered to be a stalker. Because he didn't know her. She didn't know him. She wasn't interested in him. And times have changed. Dulcinea might also have been, she might have been more hostile. Anyway, so I had this road novel with a kind of fake Quixote character. And it just gave me a way of exploring America on a widescreen canvas. And one of the things I think about Cervantes' great book is that, Don Quixote is kind of nuts. He's kind of crazy. But by the time you reach the end of the book, you think he's saner than anyone else. And you kind of love him. And that beautiful line really near the end where he sees his insanity and he says, I've been looking for this year's birds in last year's nests. Gorgeous line. And I think it's impossible to reach the end of the book and not be in love with him. And I wanted something of the same to happen to my character, that although he's foolish to the max, I thought by the end of the book, maybe he's not so foolish. Maybe he's smarter than you think. And maybe he's more lovable than you think. At least I hope that's what people think about it.
And he doesn't ride a horse, but a Chevrolet. And he's got a
very beaten up Chevrolet. It's like, Rocinante is a pretty beaten up horse. And the Chevrolet is in bad shape too.
And finally, there's a kind of a secret word game to the title, Quichotte, because both in French and English you pronounce it like that, Quichotte, but Quichotte has another unexpected meaning too, right?
Well, I mean, it depends how you pronounce it, doesn't it? But I mean, there's a key and there's a shot in it. So you can make your own meaning up from that. And the book plays word games because I'm unfortunately addicted to word games, so they show up in my work.
And you're addicted to turn famous quotations into huge, beautiful plots. I was thinking about the Moor's Last Sigh. Being where we are now, we can't omit this book, mostly set in your native city, Mumbai. And the title, as you said, is taken, of course, from the famous Sultan Boabdil's story after surrendering his Muslim kingdom here in Granada. Could you tell us a bit about your research, your personal research about this story and the meaning?
Well, it started with, what I was saying, that I was here when I was 19 years old and still at university. And I mean, what I was studying at university was history, was my subject. And so that's where I first began to be interested in the subject of Al-Andalus, and of the end of that, of the fall of this place to the Catholic kings, So I just thought I want to find out more about it. I also really liked his evil mother, who, when they're retreating from the Alhambra, and they reach the point, which is now, I think, a gas station called Suspiro. She says to him, "Well, may you weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man." I thought, that's a mother and a half. So I got interested, and it just stuck in my head. And that idea of commingled cultures finding uneasy ways to live together, or good ways to live together, or ways to not live together and be at odds with each other, that subject of what happened in Moorish Spain, I just started, I was thinking about that a lot. And then when I was writing my novel, the novel I was writing was mainly about Indian painters. Because I've, in my life, been friends with a lot of Indian painters, and so wanted to write a book about that. And one of the Indian painters, like me, is obsessed with the Alhambra Palace. And what he does is he starts painting the Alhambra Palace on top of hills in Bombay, puts it on top of Malabar Hill, and unites the cultures. So I finally found, because I didn't know how to write about, I thought it's not my subject to write about. I'm not Spanish, I'm not from the region. Somebody else's book to write, I thought, for a long time. And then I thought, no, I can find a way of taking the ideas that I've been thinking about and joining them to the world that I know better and making it the same story. I also became very, the whole subject of the Moor, the word, il Moro. For example, in Shakespeare's Othello, the Moor of Venice, he's not black, he's Arab, because the word Moor in Elizabethan English referred to Arabs, not to black people. And so then I thought, if he's an Arab, what kind of name is Othello? Nobody's called Othello. And then I thought, but there is the Arab name, Atallah, or Ataullah, and that's what he's called. That's his name. And then I thought, that's also my grandfather's name. So my grandfather became Othello in my imagination. So I've been juggling around these things, these subjects for a long time. And as I say, I came to Granada in 1966, and The Moor's Last Sigh came out in 1995. So sometimes ideas sit in your head a very long time before you find out how to use them.
And I found yet one more link with this particular city we are in. In this book, East-West, I guess in Spanish it was translated as Oriente, Occidente, probably. There's a particular short story called Christopher Columbus and Queen Isabella of Spain consummate their relationship in Santa Fe, 1492, which is to consummate their relationship. And it's a sort of political satire and a comic dreamy romance too. And that story has a special link with the history of our city and with one of our most famous statues, at the monument of Isabel la Católica with Cristóbal Colón, which was before in el Paseo del Salón, and it was moved to the famous Plaza Isabel la Católica.
Well, just
Could
to
you
be
tell
clear,
us about that story?
well, just to be clear, the way they consummate their relationship is not sexual. The way they consummate their relationship is that she gives him the money to go on the boat trip. After he's been begging at the court for years and years and years, and she treats him dismissively, with scorn. And so it's like an unhappy love affair in which there's an adoring lover and a dismissive beloved. And then they find they have something in common, which is she wants to find out what's on the other side of the sea.
And you toy with an almost Uchronia, because Columbus is always fantasizing with refusing his mission or quitting his mission, even on the verge of saying no to the queen herself, in case she finally accepts to see him. And he's just about to change his mind, but he doesn't.
No, he's on the verge of despair. And at the point at which he's despairing, he gets his wish. And I thought, I don't even know if that's a true story. I just made it up. I don't really know what was the interaction between Columbus and Isabella. But now it's in my story, so I made it up. It belongs to me. Same thing as with the killer. He belongs to me too. This is the power of fiction. People belong to you at the end of it.
Well, there's an interesting story that you might like about this famous monument that pictures the moment you tell under the form of the short story. The famous Isabel la Católica statue was meant to include Boabdil too, but the idea was dropped. So he disappeared from the statue.
As he did from history.
Exactly. So let me please finish where we started. Knife. In part 3, you mentioned the marvelous place we are at now, the Alhambra, among the visions you were having during your first days at the hospital. Do you remember those visions clearly still?
Yeah, I mean, what happened is when I was in the first days after the attack, I was on quite heavy pain medication. You know, you got everything, morphine, fentanyl, anything, all these forbidden things, I had them. Felt good. But the effect that they had on me was that I started hallucinating. And I saw visions of architecture, some imaginary, some almost real, the Alhambra, but also El Escorial, buildings like that, sort of very stern buildings, very lavish buildings. But in the hallucinations, they were all made up out of alphabets. So the letters were the building blocks of these buildings. And also letters were floating in the air. So I was seeing alphabets as architecture, alphabets as disembodied things. And then they took me off the medication. I kind of missed them. They were very beautiful. And if I had any visual gift, I would try and paint them, like the characters in the Mos Lasai painting the Alhambra on a hill in Bombay. But unfortunately, I can't paint.
Although you did sketches of the Alhambra when you were young.
I did. I mean, when I was 19, I thought, I can draw. Why not? And so I sat, in the courtyard of the Lions and all that. I have some I have some not terrible sketches of that from when I was 19. I think my sketching days are over.
So from this poetical place we love so much in our city, our vision of the world looks at least a bit clearer and better, thanks to words of beauty and wisdom like this one of yours. Art is not a luxury. It stands at the essence of our humanity, and it asks for no special protection except the right to exist. It accepts argument, criticism, even rejection. It does not accept violence. Thank you so much for visiting us, dear Salman Rushdie, and be always very, very welcome to Granada, and see you next time within 30 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. They all disappeared. Thank you. Okay.
Un segundo, por favor. Muchas gracias por la asistencia, muchas gracias a los participantes. Os recuerdo que